So we're going to come back and talk a little bit about very specific disciplinary kinds of activities. And then after we talk about discipline, then we'll do a little bit of work about dealing with adolescence. So we think about basic aspects of discipline. To me, there are really there's really kind of a simple way to think about it and look at it. Um, There's direct contact, which is just what it sounds like. Talking face to face with a kid. If a child is small, it may even mean physical contact. Stopping them from running into the street, grabbing their arm. So those types of things. Also, modeling is part of discipline, and then environmental control. One of the things that, excuse me, I think is very important and is a good thing for parents to think about is that when people tend to think about discipline, all they think about is punishment. How do we punish? If you say, well, how do you discipline your kids? Then they'll say, well, we don't spank them, or we spank them, or we ground them. Well, that's not discipline. That's punishment. Discipline is much broader than that. So if you can get parents to think about discipline as being an environmental kind of process that does involve direct contact and might involve punishment, but also involves modeling. The way you model behavior for your children is part of their discipline. The way you control the environment, what they watch, where they go, who they're with, that's part of discipline. Parents tend to get caught up in the direct contact part and very often forget about how much impact modeling and environmental control has. So if we can help them think about discipline as something much bigger than punishment and much bigger than just hands-on contact, sometimes that helps them think about new and different ways that they can help their kids. Three basic strategies happen in disciplining. One is power assertion. That's what happens when I say, I'm going to take your car keys away, or when I say, you're grounded, or when I grab a 2-year-old and swat them on the bottom. That's power assertion. I'm asserting the power that I have as an adult, as a parent, as a bigger person sometimes, in order to control you, to show you how to behave. The second form there is love withdrawal. Basically what that means is that some people parent by giving the reward of attention or affection or approval based on performance. So if you perform well, I'm going to approve of you and I'm going to give you attention and affection. If you don't perform well, I'm not. So it's kind of a reward-based system, kind of an operant conditioning approach based on how well you perform. There are problems with both of those, of course. The problem with power assertion is that power structure setup, it has its place, and it's sometimes important. Again, if there's a 2-year-old running towards the street or walking out in front of a car in a parking lot, and you grab them and you yell at them a little bit, that might keep that 2-year-old from doing that again. But if you yell at a 7-year-old or you swat a 7-year-old, that's a little different. If you scream at a 13-year-old, that's a different story still. So power assertion is occasionally appropriate, but it has its problems. The biggest problem with power assertion is that it's not conducive to good, healthy relationship. Same thing, of course, is true with love withdrawal. There are times when you might do that a little bit. You know, if a kid behaves poorly and you decide, I'm just not going to pay attention to that, I'm going to ignore that. That might be a healthy kind of thing where you withdraw attention because of behavior. But again, if you basically discipline in that way or punish in that way, so that if you do the right things, I love you. If you don't, it seems like I don't love you. Then again, that tends to destroy relationships. What we're looking at is this thing that Glenn proposes, which is the notion of induction or internalization. Helping kids develop an internal locus of control, working on getting something built into my child so that by the time he's 15 or 16 or 17 or 20, he's got this thing inside of him that disciplines him. as opposed to something coming from the outside, some external thing that causes him to behave. He develops an internal process. One of the easiest ways to do that is to just ask questions instead of telling. I'll tell this story to illustrate it. When we first moved to Abilene, the house we bought, the house we live in now, but when we bought it, it had this kind of pearl, really kind of not white, but kind of pearl-colored, silvery-colored, shimmery carpet. It's ridiculous carpet for people with kids. But that's what it had when we bought it. So for a while, we were paranoid and crazy, and we tried to keep the carpet clean. That was not going to happen. But we tried for a while. And so when we get to the back door after we'd been somewhere, Lori at that time had been actually, reading this book. And she'd been thinking about this. So we get to the back door, and I would tend to do things like say, take your shoes off before you go in the house. Lori started using this idea and saying, what do we do when we get to the back door? And all you had to do was tell them once or twice, and then you start asking the question. So we'd say, what do we do at the back door? And the girls would say, we take our shoes off. Okay, good. If you can get that to happen, they've internalized the discipline. Okay? It's not coming from the outside, it's coming from the inside. So if you're trying to get your 3-year-old to understand that we brush our teeth at night, then instead of saying, brush your teeth before you go to bed, don't forget to brush your teeth. If you don't brush your teeth, you can't, don't do that. Explain, we brush our teeth before we go to bed, and then say, what do we do before we go to bed? And the kid says, we brush our teeth. If they can do that, they've internalized the idea. Now, it's not magic. It doesn't mean that they're never going to forget to brush their teeth or they're always going to be perfect in their behavior. What it means is that is now inside their head, and that's where you want it to be. Because when they're 17 and somebody says, let's get high, you want them to have this thing inside of their head that says, what do we do when someone invites us to get high? We say no. That's what you want in your 17-year-old. Okay? And you got to start that when they're little by making them tell you, talking about it as if it's inside of them, not coming to them from you, but that it's becoming built into who they are. Okay? Let's take a minute really quickly and talk about punishment versus reinforcement. If you're a psychology person, you may have a good grip on this, but it's important to say it anyway. Another problem that we have with parents is that they tend to focus on punishment more than anything else. Our culture focuses on punishment more than anything else. We know, as psychologists, that punishment doesn't work nearly as well as reinforcement. Now, all you've got to do is think about getting a traffic ticket to realize that this is the case. If you get a speeding ticket, my question always is, okay, you got punished. They took away something important to you, money. They gave you something that was bad, a fine, some type of punishment. You were punished for speeding. How many of us get a speeding ticket and then we never speed again? Well, nobody. We all speed again because punishment doesn't work that well. Okay? Reinforcement works. I would propose to you that if the highway patrol people were driving up and down the highway with a box full of $100 bills, and every time they saw somebody driving the speed limit, they were free to stop them and give them a $100 bill. More of us would drive the speed limit because it'd be like gambling. We would be getting this varied interval, varied ratio reinforcement, and we would drive the speed limit because we'd think any moment I might get stopped and make $100 for nothing except driving the speed limit, because reinforcement works better. Okay? Now, punishment does sometimes work, of course. If you want to stop a behavior immediately, then punishment works. But if you want learning to occur so that a child internalizes that process, you want to use reinforcement, not punishment. Punishment comes from the outside. Reinforcement can begin to come from the inside. Now, when does punishment work? 3 things. Okay? Punishment works best if it's immediate, if it happens right then. Delayed punishment doesn't work. That's one reason why speeding tickets don't work so well, because you get stopped for speeding and then you have like 30 days to do something to pay the fine. You don't feel the punishment right then. It's the same reason why prison doesn't work and death penalty ideas, all that. It's not immediate. As soon as I did something wrong, if somebody slapped me in the face really hard, I'd be more likely to quit doing something wrong. But punishment has to be immediate in order for it to work best. It also has to be consistent. The rules can't change. If one parent lets me get away with something and one punishes me, that's just going to confuse me. That punishment is not going to have much of an effect. I'm certainly not going to learn from it. The third thing is, for punishment to be best, it has to be accompanied by explanation and nurturing. There have been studies that show that if you punish a child, but you put your hand on their shoulder and you talk to them and explain why they're being punished, their behavior tends to change more. If you just punish them, it doesn't work as well. If you just punish them and explain, it doesn't work as well. But if you punish them and explain it, and you touch them in a kind way, they tend to learn more, and punishment tends to work best that way.